What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. And today we're going to be talking about um, COVID-19 and the changes it's had on our outcome of our trips for the first half of the year. If you're new to the channel, I'm going to ask hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications. I upload videos every day because I have no life right now, so there's nothing else to do. If you want to help support the channel, I'm asked please hit the like button, as it will help grow the channel greatly. Starting back in January 29th of this year, 2021, we were under the impression that since 2020 was over, all the chaos and BS from 2020 would just magically disappear. But yeah, 2021 started out to be pretty worse than 2020. For us, at least, it is. Because we went from taking trips every month to having fun to doing this. When January hit, I knew that I had a trip coming up in June that was pretty expensive. So I needed to work a lot of overtime to be able to pay for it, which I had no problem in doing. It was considered to be our off season anyway. So why not work some overtime? In the process of working the overtime, I ended up putting my body under enormous amounts of stress, which weakened my immune system, which is how I came down with COVID-19. About how I felt during it, I figured I had it, but I wasn't exactly sure. I woke up one day to go to work. I was working overtime that day, and I just felt like I had been hit by a Peterbilt truck. I was just clammy, and I was just sore, didn't really want to move, just wanted to sleep. I was really congested, so I just assumed that, it was just a really bad sinus infection because it was in January, which is usually around the times that my sinuses flare up a lot. So I just viewed it as a head cold. So I went to work anyway, and as I'm going through the night, as things are just getting worse, I got no energy. I'm really just I'm just completely wiped out. So I came to the conclusion that, maybe I was just overworked, because at the time I had worked like 12 days in a row, 12 hours a day. So in 12 days I had worked 144 hours. So I was pretty wiped out. So that's why I assumed maybe I'd go home, get some rest, and get some extra rest, and come back tomorrow and I'll be just fine. I think I left work that night like 2 hours early. So I stayed most of the night. And then I woke up the next day and I felt no better. I actually felt worse, and I was actually running a fever. I think I had like 102, almost 103 degree fever. So that's when I said, okay, we need to go to the doctor. Because I was supposed to work my scheduled day that day. I told them I wasn't feeling good, so I called and told them I'm taking a couple of vacation days. So they approved them because they knew I'd been working a lot anyway. I went to the doctor, and I thought I had the flu because with the body aches and everything. It wasn't really anything severe at the time. It was just body aches, fever, clamminess, loss of appetite. So it sounded like the flu. So they tested me for strep, flu, and COVID-19. Flu test came back negative, strep test came back negative, COVID test came back positive. After the COVID test came back positive, I told work, and I had to quarantine for 10 days. From when my symptoms originally started, it was the longest and most boring 10 days ever, and it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. I had the flu when I was a teenager, and compared to the flu, this was like a cold compared to the flu. It was the only really bad thing was the shortness of breath, getting up and moving around too much. I would feel myself being like really short of breath, not being able to catch my breath. It was more along the lines of breathing really heavily after moving quite frequently. If I would get up and walk from one side of the house to the other, my body would act as if I had been running a mile. The breathing heavy, the elevated heart rate, and stuff like that. So it was kind of annoying. I lost my taste of food, and I couldn't really smell anything, which kind of came in handy. When you've got gas a lot, because that's something that COVID brings to you. You burp a lot, and you got a lot of gas too. So I didn't really have to smell it, so it really wasn't my problem. So that was one of the benefits with it. But the negative things about not being able to taste anything is when you eat something, you don't taste the food. All you taste is the texture of the food. So for example, I wanted some ramen noodles because I really hadn't eaten anything, and it was just putting something on my stomach. I couldn't taste the ramen noodles. All I could taste was the texture of the noodles, which was by far the worst texture of any food in the history of mankind. I don't care who you are. The texture of ramen noodles with no flavor at all, and not putting any seasoning on them, and just the texture of noodles, it's just really, really weird. So there was that. 10 days went by, and I was still really short of breath. So work told me to get a doctor's release to come back. So I went back to the doctor a couple days after that, because Megan came down with it too. So I had to quarantine because I had been around her, and she had tested positive for it too. So it was like an extra 3 days of quarantine, which wasn't that big a deal. When our quarantine was over with, we made a trip to Six Flags to kind of celebrate kind of coming off quarantine and kind of beating the COVID-19 or whatever. We didn't stay the whole day. I think there was a previous video where we had made it kind of like our post-COVID trip. And we were pretty wiped after about 4 or 5 hours of walking around the park and riding stuff. We were able to ride everything. But we were just completely wiped, and we dipped out. We took the kid with us, just to get a trip, because we hadn't seen him. We hadn't spent any time with him in 12 days period. So it was pretty bad. After that trip, went back to work the following Monday. First few days was pretty rough, getting back in the routine of working, but after about a week of it and fighting through it, things seemed to be getting back to normal. Ended up going back to work for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then it came time to do our next trip, which was on March the 7th. We were going to Six Flags over Texas to do a park review. And it was probably the best I had felt all year. And you guys seem to really enjoy that video because it's got over 600 views on it. So I really want to appreciate you guys' support on those videos. But it was great, and we had a great time. It was probably the most fun I'd had all year. Even now, was probably the best trip so far that I've had. We were able to take my son's mom and her other 2 kids for the first time, so that was great. You wouldn't have known that in the video unless you had been there and had seen it or heard it being mentioned or whatever. And then I think a couple weeks after that, I thought I'd got reinfected with COVID, but actually went back to the doctor. Actually ended up firing my old doctor and getting a new doctor, who actually diagnosed me with post-COVID syndrome. I posted a video a few days ago about post-COVID syndrome and what it was and what my experiences is with it. So it was pretty much everything that you got when you initially got the acute infection of COVID kind of kicked into overdrive. It lasts longer, and it's definitely more severe. The fatigue is way worse. The inflammation is completely ridiculous. I think everything from my sternum up is inflamed. My shoulders, my chest muscles. Long COVID is definitely more annoying than original COVID. After a while, the doctor recommended that I get a COVID vaccine, which is scheduled for the 17th. Not exactly sure if I'm actually going to go through with getting that or not. I've got 10 days to decide. So it is what it is. Originally, they said that I didn't qualify because I didn't fall within the age group, or my immune system wasn't compromised enough to qualify me for it. But today, doctors clarified that they thought I would be a really good candidate to be able to get the vaccine. So I made the appointment for it. It's 10 days away. So now we got 10 days to figure out an excuse to not to get it. But overall, it's just been, the whole post-COVID thing has just been really, really annoying. I have actually been out of work since the 22nd of last month, and this is April the 7th. I don't go back until the 14th. That's when I'm scheduled to go back to work, and I'm not even going to be going back to work like 100%. I think they'll be sending me back to work at like diminished capacity to work at my own pace for a week or so. And then after that, so probably I would have missed just about a month of work with all of this. It's been really rough, and I've got a lot of grief from a lot of people. Nobody that knows me personally, not friends and not family. They've all been really concerned and, trying to be there and show the support that I need. But then I've got people on the opposite side that want to sit there and make it into something that it's not. And it's, oh, well, there's this and there's this and there's this. Well, you should be able to do this. You should be able to do that. And the thing is with this whole thing, you want to do everything that you normally would do, but your body just won't allow you to do it. And anytime you try to push your body to do it, you spend 2 days trying to recover from it. And the reason what makes the post-COVID so insane is because on paper and medically, there's nothing wrong with you. Like the chest pain and the shortness of breath, you can read your heart rate to be normal. Your levels and blood panels will all come back normal. Thyroid levels normal. All that stuff will come back normal. But you still got the underlying symptoms, which can't really be described with a medical test. So that's why medically it's really hard to diagnose, and it's really hard to be able to really treat. But then you've got some people that are just completely fucking brain dead that just care about, not having to do this and not having to do that. I'm not going to say who they are. But the moment that you start caring less and less about what people's health is and more about what your money is, that's the moment where you really shouldn't be in that line of work. You should probably either find a different profession or just move to a different country. It's harsh and it is what it is, but I state the facts and it's the truth. It's not toxic. It's the truth. The moment that somebody tells you they don't feel comfortable in doing something and you try to force them into doing something, it's inhumane. And if they do what you pretty much saying and they end up hurting themselves or the condition ends up getting worse, then you become liable for it. And a lot of people don't think about that they think that they don't have a choice because whoever it is has some power over them. But you've got to be able to stand up for yourself, and you got to be able to stand up for what you believe in, and you've got to let your family stand behind you and listen to what they say, because a lot of times when you're sick, you don't really know what's going to be best for you because all you care about is getting back to normal. You're not really objective. So listen to your friends and listen to your family. I linked a COVID support group, post-COVID support group in the description of my last video. I'll link it again in this one for anyone else that's struggling with something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to share my experience with the initial onset of COVID. When I originally came down with the infection, I started comparing it to the flu that I had when I was a teenager. And when I had the flu in the teenager, I legit thought I was going to die, because that's how I felt. I felt like death. A part of me wanted to die because that's how bad I felt. I didn't want to move. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was throwing up, high fever. It's the whole shebang, but it was way worse than having COVID. COVID was like an upper respiratory infection with a couple of extra symptoms that attacked your respiratory, gave you shortness of breath and destroyed your taste and killed your appetite. But yeah, flu was way worse. And I'm not downplaying it for people who have had family members and friends that have, been infected and died to the virus, because I'm not saying that it's not as serious, because it's very serious if you don't treat it. If you just go along and act like nothing's wrong and you don't do anything about it, then yeah, you're going to have problems. But there are a lot of people that can't really handle being infected by that virus, and it can be deadly to them. So my experience by no means undermines anything that happened with them or anyone that's happened with anyone else that's had really bad experiences with it. Well, all right, man, that's going to do it for this one. I'm out of breath here. You guys have a good one, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.